All right, welcome back to another episode of the New Limits podcast. Today we have a guest in the house, JC. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
JC, tell us a little bit about what you do.
So I am a freelance photographer. I've been doing this for about 6 years now. It all started on I guess you could call it a journey to the motherland. My mom's from Nicaragua.
Yeah.
So it just pretty much started with like everybody's like, with a smartphone, and then from there it became into grabbing a camera and going in a different direction. So I've been doing this now for 6 years. So I haven't looked back since then.
It's crazy. So you mentioned that you started with a smartphone.
Yeah.
What smartphone was it?
It was a Samsung. It was the Samsung Note Edge.
What year was this?
So this was, let's go back 6 years ago.
So we didn't even have like 4K.
No, there was no 4K, there was no HD. It was just whatever cameras and whatever pixels they had. It just went with it.
Were you just putting stuff up on Instagram? Or?
At first, I was putting stuff on Instagram. I pretty much was capturing like everything that I was taking from my trip to Nicaragua, and then. When I came back home, I was like, what, I have to get myself a camera, but I didn't have the resources for it, so I still kept on shooting with my smartphone. And a lot of people were like, hey, you know what? Even with the smartphone, you're as good as any photographer with their camera. I was like,
that's awesome.
Okay.
The reason why I wanted to invite you on this podcast is because you're somebody that's pretty much like hustling and like kind of living the American dream, the entrepreneurship dream. And right away when I first met you, dude, it was like I could tell that like I can feel that like energy about you, that like you're hustling, that you're like boom, 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 like making things happen, moving and grooving.
I appreciate that.
And that's crazy how you can just feel that energy from somebody. And
Definitely.
I was like, yeah, I need to get you on my podcast.
Well, I appreciate you having me on the podcast. Yeah. It's the first time that I'm on a podcast. It's the first time I'm being asked to come on and to be interviewed. So the nerves are running high right now, but I feel
it's good you acknowledge that.
So I feel like right now, as we're moving forward, I feel like it'll get a lot better.
Yeah, and you said that you recently, you've been doing it for 6 years, and you just got a studio. Did you ever feel like you would have your own studio?
To be honest with you, I didn't. I was already getting to that point where I was going to ask my friends, like, hey man, like, how much do you charge to rent your studio? Like, I'll rent it. I'll do what I can. And I just thought, like, I was just gonna do outdoor photography,
Weddings,
quinceañeras, and I've done a couple quinceañeras. Yeah. I've done 2 quinceañeras, and you know what? It was my first time doing it. And I was so nervous. I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. But you know what? The fact that it put me in a level that I wasn't ready for. It took me out of my comfort zone, because at the time I was only taking pictures of landscape, just buildings and high rises, and that was about it. But when the opportunity was presented, like, hey, I had a friend of mine, he's like, hey, my daughter's about to turn 15, can you do the quinceañera? I was like, yeah, and I did it. It took me out of my comfort zone. It took me out of everything that I didn't know out of photography, and I tackled it.
Yeah. So, what was your biggest fear when it came to like doing your first gig? What kind of gig was it?
My very first gig was, like I said, it was quinceañera.
Okay.
It was one of those moments where it's like you were a paparazzi for this young lady, going in the limo, going to the spots that they had designated for the photo shoots. Like, you had to pinpoint, and I had to tell the girl, okay, I need you to look at me like this. I need you to focus like this. So doing that was really hard, because it's like, damn, like
you're directing everything.
Yeah, you're directing, you're taking pictures, and you're making sure that picture comes out real good.
Yeah. So you're like leading the whole thing.
Yeah.
As you go.
Yeah, and then you have the parent in the background. Okay, look like this, look like that. It's like, You know, and I'm like, and I'm okay with it because at the end of the day, like I am trying to make someone's vision, someone's memory last a lifetime. I want, you know, going into that first gig that I had, I wanted to make sure that not just the girl herself, her parents, her family members have something that they can cherish for a long time. Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like once she grows old and she has her family, like, you know, I want their kids to be like, wow, you know, that's a great picture. That
Yeah,
like, wow.
there's a huge sentimental value in
Yeah.
photos.
Oh yeah.
It's definitely one thing that like everyone has. Everyone has photos of a memory or something. Even my mom, like I'm sure your mom probably does it too or whatever. But they keep photos from like when you were babies or like 80s or photos from the 70s, and it's like wow, like photos will never go out of style.
No.
Like that thing will never. People will always need memories to.
And you know, as
cherish.
as a photographer, like I've always like, you know, I look at a picture and I think to myself like, damn, like what kind of camera did they have back then, or how did they make this picture come to life? Like how has the color, the contrast, how has everything been preserved? You know, and yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. Like our parents, at least my mom, she's like, you know, when I leave this earth, I'm just gonna leave all these pictures with you. I'm like, okay, so that way when you have your kids, which I now have my very first daughter, it's like I look at me when I was a newborn and compare it to my daughter. It's like, okay, she's got my hair, she doesn't look nothing like me, but dang, like it's good to have resources to go back and forth and compare the contrasts. So
Yeah.
it's an
This
amazing
is
thing.
beautiful about photos. You can just compare.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but my parents never took a lot of photos of me when I was growing up. But nowadays, like with smartphones and everything, you could capture somebody's entire life, like your kids, from like when they're born, like every moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I exactly know what you mean because, like I said, I'm a first time dad, so like, I I brought my phone, so I pretty much have like not just the pictures that I have from my clients, but I'm pretty sure I have around 2,000 to 3,000 pictures of my daughter since the time that she was born.
Yeah.
You know, every month is a photo shoot. Every month is a laying on the blanket. Okay, we're at 5 months, and it's like anything you could think of being spontaneous at that moment. And the one thing that I love being a photographer is that I don't have to take my daughter anywhere else. I have the equipment. I have everything at the house ready to like do a spontaneous photo shoot for her. And that's the one thing that I love. Yeah, you know, a lot, I learned the hard way. I was always, I guess in my own mind, I was always naive. I always thought that I needed that camera to capture that moment. I thought that I needed that camera to capture that portrait shot of someone.
Yeah.
But like, you know, everyone's like, well, what camera do you use? Well, I use a Canon Rebel T6 and a Nikon D300. But I always tell like the people that I meet, I was like, well, you know, if I can't carry it with me wherever I go, I have my phone. My phone is the best resource. You know, even if I take a picture on my camera, I always put it on my phone and I edit on a go as well, because, you know, it's like you're constantly moving, you're constantly trying to capture that next moment.
Yeah, that's so true. And I feel like because of the phones, it's become a even more competitive field, photography, especially on Instagram or I don't know, other sites that focus on images. But what do you think separates you? What are you trying to do to separate yourself from like everybody other photographer? Because I feel like everyone has their own style, and obviously people copy from other styles and other people. But what is the JC brand, I guess?
The JC brand is just being. I know this is probably going to sound corny, but I feel for me the JC brand is just being original, being yourself.
I was literally gonna say that. I was gonna say authentic.
I mean, you know, it's not a bad idea to like. I'm not going to knock any photographer, because there's a lot of photographers that I like admire.
I say that because I feel that from you from the bat. Like I went on your Instagram, I saw your pictures on your website, and I feel like you have this talent to be able to capture you're good at portraits, like the rawness and someone's personality from just a photo. I feel like you can capture that.
Yeah, you know, when I did my, it wasn't. Here's a quick story. It's a long story, but I'm gonna try and shorten it down.
Yeah.
There's this artist that I work with. His name is K Pilla, and I went to a Bulls game that I didn't even get to get into that night. It was crazy. President Obama was there. It was Derrick Rose versus LeBron James. And long story short, I didn't get into.
Did you guys have? You were in this.
I didn't
game?
even get to go into the game.
Oh,
That's
okay.
how bad it was. The guy who sold the tickets on StubHub resold those tickets, and I got the resell, and I didn't even get to get in. So
Damn.
at that night, I met this guy, K Pilla. He's like, "Yo, man, like, how's it going?" And at that moment, I'm like, I don't even want to talk to this guy. I don't even want to, like, nothing. I was barely even getting into my photography at this point.
Yeah.
But here's where it came down to. He was starting out rapping. I listened to him freestyle, and by me like listening to him, I told him after the card ride, I was like, "Yo, man, I'm like, you're gonna go places where you've never gone before, man. So keep going at what you're doing, and hopefully I'll see you somewhere down the line." I got my first camera from my family in Miami. And when I got that camera, as soon as I got that camera, I hit K Pilla up. I went to his Instagram. We chatted from time to time. I hit him up. I was like, "Hey man, I got my camera. I wanna do a photo shoot with you." And the photographer rookie mistake is that they don't want you to shoot in JPEG. JPEG and RAW, two different things.
Yeah.
When you're shooting JPEG, it compresses everything. You have very little to edit a picture. But when you got RAW, it's like you got the imperfect of almost perfection, and you have to just give it that tweak.
Yeah.
So it was my first time doing a photo shoot. It was the first time seeing this guy in about 3 years. And since then, we've established a relationship like no other. He's one of my favorite clients, and what's crazy is that through that, I've built a friendship with him. I've gone out to events with his family, his wife, kids. I've got endless of content of him, of his wife, of his kids. It's like in my own world, I feel like I'm famous because I've reached that plateau so fast that I'm capturing someone from Chicago. I'm capturing someone who is doing big things in his life. So I feel like, I've always told him, I was like, man, when you go on your tour, I'm going with you.
And he's a rapper, you said?
He's a rapper. Yeah.
What's his name?
K Pilla.
K Pilla.
K-P-I-L-L-A.
Okay.
We just finished
He's the guy, he's on your website.
He's on my website. Yeah, he's on my website. He's actually on my Instagram too. There's a picture of him in my website. It's like all red.
So was that like your first portrait or?
No, well,
one of the first photo shoots, right?
He was one of my
Okay.
first photo shoots, one of my first portraits. Yes.
Oh, okay. And I got you. That's interesting. So what other, I guess, I have some questions written down here. What was the biggest failure that you've had when one of your photo shoots, and what have you learned from it?
Man, one of my biggest failures has to be when
Any embarrassing stories?
the biggest failure at that
You
moment.
didn't charge your camera?
No. The biggest one was I did a second quinceañera. It was for a good friend of mine, his sister, and there's 2 pictures of her on my website. The biggest mistake that I ever did was we went down to Millennium Park, and I had this and it's coming to my mind right now. I had this amazing picture of her sitting in front of the bean, and everybody that was around her made her feel like the belle of the ball. They're like, "Oh my God, look at her dress! Oh my God, she's so cute."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Yo, everybody," I'm like, "It's this girl's birthday. Do me a favor, let's make her feel special," and this and that. Like, I had everybody that was at that bean legitimately turn their attention away from the bean to pay attention to that girl. And I will never remember it I will never forget it, because after that picture was the worst rookie mistake ever. I didn't have like my camera around my neck. I didn't have like a bracelet to attach it to me. I had it loosely down by my waist, and the next thing I noticed, I start hearing these like, sorry for the noise I'm gonna make. I just hear, and I'm like, oh no, and I hear like a snatch, and someone stole my camera in broad daylight while I was doing this cotillion.
No way.
Yeah. So at that point, like in my head, I was like, do I chase after him? Do I go? But the guy was long gone.
Wow.
And what killed
That's
me,
crazy,
yeah,
man.
at that moment, I didn't care about my camera. I cared about the safety of the people that I was with.
Yeah.
But the one thing that hurt me that day was that I will never, and to this day, like, I wish someone would be like, you know what, man, I found this. Or if someone ever posted that picture, I'd be like, that's me. The only one picture I wanted was that moment that I made my friend's sister so special by taking everyone's attention from a big thing in Chicago to focus on this young lady's day. That was to me, that was my like biggest rookie mistake as a photographer. Not having the proper safety to make sure that no one could take my camera away from me.
So all those photos that you took that day?
Gone.
Gone?
I had to.
Wow. Did they end up paying you still?
Yeah, I ended up getting paid. Again, we talk about, what other thing can you do? I had my iPhone 10 at the time, and I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna let this ruin my day. I'm not gonna let this ruin her day, because it was all about her. And I was like, you know what? I was like, we're gonna do this with my phone. She's like, okay. And I was able to still capture some good moments.
Wow.
A buddy of mine at that time, he's like, hey man, I can go get you, I can go get you my other camera, and you can continue shooting.
Well, talk about like just rolling with the punches, man. I would be like freaking out. I lost my camera. I can't do my job. And you're like, wait, it's this girl's day.
Yeah.
I'm just use my phone.
And what's crazy
I
is
probably wouldn't even have enough memory on my phone.
Man, see when I buy my phones, I make sure that it's like the top. Like my phone currently,
Yeah.
I've gotten a lot of my friends are like, yo, how many gigabytes do you have on your phone? Like 512. Why so much? I was like, dude, you have to understand, like, as a photographer, you're not gonna always carry your laptop, your MacBook. You're not always gonna carry that with you wherever you go. So, I have all the programs I have on my MacBook. I have them on my phone. So it's like I will just
you can work on the go.
Work on the go.
Yeah, you always want to be prepared as a photographer because you never know. Any moment can present themselves, and there's a shot right there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Like creativity strikes in the moment when you're a photographer, right?
It does. Like a lot of people are like, yo, where do you get your ideas? You go to Pinterest? I'm like, nah. I'm just, like I said, like you were asking, like what is the JC Image brand? It's just being original. It's just being you. It's it starts with a vision, and like that's my slogan. It starts with a vision and it ends with you. I want my client to feel comfortable. I want my client to just, if they need to be goofy
to
and
be themselves,
just be themselves.
Yeah.
Like I just want my clients to feel so comfortable where it's like, you know what, I'm gonna recommend you to all my friends, and oh my God, I can't wait to see this. It's just that's who I am. I've never wanted to emulate. I've always, before I started saying like, okay, what am I gonna get myself into? I always wanted to be like, yo, I want to be like the next. I don't know. Have you ever heard of Barry Butler? He's a photographer that takes amazing pictures of the Chicago skyline.
Okay.
I would recommend
Barry Butler.
Barry Butler.
All right.
So I was like, you know what? I want to be just like him, or I want to be like Ivan. I don't want to butcher his last name, but he takes pictures for DJ Khaled and all these top celebrities. And it's like, that's great. I could be, or I want to be somewhere similar to them, but it's like, who's JC really? Who is he, and what is his brand going to be about?
Yeah.
So for me, it's about, you know what? I'll have my day one day. I'll have my time
Right.
where I will catch that celebrity. But for now, I'm thankful.
Grind, hustle, and execute.
Yeah, pretty much. Your signs, they say it all, you know, like I never thought that, you know, in the midst of this pandemic, I would be blessed with having my own studio.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I
man.
know you brought that up, and I
Where's your
just,
studio at?
my studio is located in Chicago. It's in the heart of the Creighton Belmont area, so it's like on Austin and Belmont. And yeah, like I was talking to my wife one day, and I was like, you know, like I'm like, it would be awesome if one day I could have my own studio where I could just take my photography and not have to worry about renting someone's space or, you know, I don't know, you know, and what's crazy is that while my wife and I were talking about it, my mother-in-law like eavesdropped on the conversation, and I love that about, you know, my family, is that they're supportive, and my mother-in-law is like, hey, the building manager wants to talk to you, and so we were talking, and long story short, he's like, yeah, he's like, your mother-in-law talked to me saying that you are a photographer. I'm like, yeah. He's like, all right. He's like, well, he's like, I'll give you this space, use it as you must.
Slowly
And
but surely.
during a pandemic,
Yeah.
I would have never imagined to have my own studio closing out the year.
Yeah, I feel like this pandemic is allowing a lot of people with opportunities. I mean, I feel like there's always a yin yang to situations, you know, when there's travesties like pandemics, and the flip side, there's huge opportunities. Wherever you look, in the Great Depression, I'm sure there was huge opportunities during that era too.
There is,
So it's pretty exciting times. And this is a new studio that we're in right now. So
it's an amazing
it's
studio.
just
man.
like the energy is just flowing,
Yeah.
man. It's crazy. So
Yeah.
I know you've only been doing it for 6 years, somewhat, but you know, right now, especially because we're in a pandemic and a lot of people are maybe thinking about switching careers or maybe doing things as side hustles, you know. I know you're one of many photographers that I know around the area. What advice would you give somebody who maybe wants to start out taking photography, or maybe they have it as a hobby, but maybe they don't realize that they can make it into a side hustle? Or what advice would you give that person?
My advice to them is just like to continue doing what they do. Love it. Learn. You can only get better at it if you continue learning. You know, I always ask a lot of my friends, like, hey man, like, can you teach me? They're like, there's YouTube. That's your best resource. And I'm like, that's not the answer I want, but you know what? It's true. My advice to someone who's starting to take photography, who has used it as a hobby, who's saying, hey, like, how can I get better at this? Learn, do your research, read some books, go on YouTube. There's a lot of videos out there that have helped me, and even network with a lot of photographers that are out there. Yeah, you might get the ones that are like won't respond right away, but as long as you are true to what you love, as long as you're true and grinding every day, you know, you're gonna get better. You can only get better.
It's only over time, right?
Yeah, and believe me, I have picked so many photographers' brains. I have asked so many questions. I have, you know, what kind of camera should I get? Your best camera is either your phone or the camera that you just, a film camera. You know, there's a photographer that I look up to a lot. Her name is Zoe Rain. She is the personal photographer for Macklemore, Chance the Rapper, and a bunch of other like musicians.
Yeah.
I had asked her when I first started. I went to Apple for a Today at Apple session, and she was like the keynote speaker. My question to her after the entire keynote was over with, I asked her, I was like, hey, I'm starting to get into photography. Should I charge? Should I do this? Should I do that? She's like, no, you're starting to get into photography, you are in no way, shape, or form
In no position. To
in
charge.
no position to charge anyone. You're doing this for free until you get better at what you do.
Yeah.
And I'm like, damn, that's not the answer I wanted, you know?
You got humbled quick.
Right. I'm like, I want to make the money right away. But like when she told me that, like I was like, I'm like, okay, I guess, yeah. But like, I'll never forget it because of her telling me like, hey, if it's your first photo shoot, you're not charging.
Yeah.
You're telling them I'm offering you my services because one, you're getting that person out of their comfort zone, and two, you are getting yourself that exposure that you need to start one day.
Yeah.
Be like, you know what? Okay, now I'm ready. And even then, like right now, like you know, I just my advice to that person, male, female, young man that's growing up, young lady that's growing up, just love it,
Keep
cherish
doing it for the love.
and even if it's through a smartphone, just take pictures.
Yeah.
You know, when you have the resources and get yourself that first camera, make sure that's the camera you want. Make sure that's the camera you're gonna stick with for a while, because it's like, oh, you know, I always fell into that trap where it's like, so and so has this camera and so has that camera. Well, I want that camera.
Yeah.
And then when
you want to keep up with
right,
everyone
and
else.
then when people are like, oh, what do you shoot with? I'm like, oh, I shoot with this. I was like, that's even better than that's better than nothing, man.
Yeah.
Like, just keep doing it.
What's a common myth or misconception from the in your field? I mean, is there a myth or a common misconception? I guess one of them could have been like the charging people for your first time.
That
But-
that was it. The charging people at the first time. I thought like, how can I make money quick and how can I do it fast? But it was like no one's gonna pay you if you're not if they don't see something. Like I was already at that, like when I first started, I was reaching out to local artists. I'm like, yo, like my name's JC. Like
Yeah, you're just trying to connect.
yeah,
with
and they're like,
people.
all right, you got a portfolio? I was like, Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great, but do you have a website? I'm like, no. All right, well, let me know when you got a website. So
Yeah.
I'm like, wow.
That's crazy. But see, you learned that because you got out there and you put yourself out there, and that's how you learn, right? Just, okay, now I need this. Okay, now I need that.
it wasn't easy.
Yeah.
It wasn't easy. I'll tell you that much. You know, like there, it came to a point where I was like, you know what? After my camera was stolen, I think that's where I was like, you know, I even started a GoFundMe page, and
You started a
I
GoFundMe.
started a GoFundMe page. I got some money, but I wasn't what I was asking for. But you know
Yeah.
what? At least I got something. I had saved it, and I was like, you know what? Whatever. But I'll tell you this much. I've been excuse me. I've been, man. I'm not getting choked up. I just burping here. I'm gonna just go out on a limb and say this, that I have been during this pandemic, I was blessed through an ex-coworker of mine who was selling a camera.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, at that time, I told my wife, I'm like, I just want a camera. I just want to. I'm really serious about this photography. I know I can achieve greatness.
Yeah.
I just need my camera.
Yeah.
An ex-coworker of mine is like, yo, you know what? I'm selling this Canon, 3 lenses.
Mm-hmm.
It's yours for this much. I was like,
You bring up a really good topic, man, which is just becoming aligned with your family and your close ones, you know. I feel like if you don't communicate that and what your vision is and what you want to achieve and where like your mind is heading, it's going to be difficult because you're always going to be bumping into like, you know, resistance from your friends and your family members. Like for example, like when I started doing with what I'm doing now with real estate, my parents would be like, hey, we don't see you anymore, this and that. Or like people would just be like, yo, how come you don't come out, or we don't see you anymore? But it was like until I communicated that with my parents and like friends and family members, like, yo, this is what I'm doing. I hope you can come on board, yada, yada, yada. You know, it's just so powerful to have people understand where you're at and where you want to go.
yeah.
And you know, a lot of people, I know at least for me, I was scared to share my goals before because a lot of people have limiting beliefs about themselves. Like, you know, they don't think that they can achieve greatness. And then just even thinking that and then speaking that is even harder. Like telling someone like, I want to achieve greatness. This is what I want to do. Like for a lot of people, especially for me, that was really hard. So I don't know. You brought that up.
Yeah, man. It was because like, you know, like I said, I am a proud father of a baby girl who's about to be 6 months. You know, and here I am telling my wife like, hey, like this is what I want to do. Like, what do you think? Like, I feel like if you really truly want those to back you up, support you, give you that love, it's like, this is my vision. This is what I want to do. Are you guys on board? Are you guys with me? Like for me, the biggest question is, how do you balance, now that you're a dad, how do you balance that with your photography? For me personally, like I make sure like everything in my family is set, everything is in order, but I also have a schedule where it's like, yo,
You gotta balance it out.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like I always let my wife know, hey, on this date, like in a couple of weeks, I have a photo shoot. What I do is I prioritize everything. We have our calendars, like, you know, I share the days that I'm working. I share if I have a photo shoot, like today. I like when you asked me to come on for your podcast, I let my wife. I created an event. I shared it with her, and she's like, oh, she's like, something just cut. Yeah, I'm like, I'm just letting you know right now. This is what's going on. She's like, cool, you know, like priority. Make sure you have everything in order before you start being like, hey, I'm gonna go do this photo shoot, because it's like, all right, well, did you make sure you have everything ready at home first?
Yeah.
I didn't. You might want to do that. That's been one of the biggest things is like prioritizing myself, making sure everything at home is in order first.
Yeah.
Then I'll be like, okay, babe, everything's cool, great. I'm gonna go do this photo shoot.
It's pretty cool. You guys have share like events.
Yeah, we started doing that when we started dating. She would share her work schedule. I would share mine. We would be like, hey,
okay.
I get out at work at like 5. She's like, okay, I get out at 5:30. Great, I'll meet you at your job. So like now it's it's just being consistent, being able to
Being
keep
available, pretty much.
yes, and keeping everybody in the loop. Like you said, your family are your biggest supporters, even if they don't see it at first. Like
Yeah, they won't see it at first.
they won't see it
They
at first,
won't.
but once they see everything that's evolving, they're like,
Once they see the success or at least some of it, like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, we get it.
yeah. I always tell my clients, and I always tell my wife, I'm like, I'm not in this. The quote that the young generation uses, clout. I'm not in it for, you know, I'm not in it for the clout. I'm not in it to be known, you know. Like if someone tells me, yo, didn't you shoot like, you know, so and so? Yeah. Oh, okay, cool. Like I just want to remain humble.
Yeah.
I just want to remain humble. I just want to know that, yeah, I am that photographer. I am, you know, JC.
You did it for the love. JC
Right.
did it for the love. Cool, man. Well, before we wrap this up, is there any other questions that, you know, you wish I would have asked you, or anything that, you know, you kind of want to bring up in this podcast?
No, man. I just want to thank you for having me on your podcast. You know, you yourself, I have a friend of mine, Gabby Vargas. We both know her. She sent me a link to your podcast, your very first podcast, and I just want to thank you for having me on here. You're doing a great job, and I mean
Thank
it.
you. Yeah.
Keep going. Keep. You know, who cares about these mistakes, these slip ups, man? It's
Yeah.
you know, it's like, you know, yeah, you have an
It's
audience
part of
watching,
life. It's
but you
part
have
of-
an audience listening too. So
Yeah.
I just keep going, man. Thank you for having me on here, man. Seriously.
Appreciate it. Likewise. So where can people find you? Where can
Yeah,
people
definitely.
Find your stuff?
So I'm on Instagram. They can follow me on JC JC the third dot images.
So it's JC.
JC,
Three
Roman numeral
eyes.
3 eyes, and then dot
Okay.
images.
Okay.
And then my website, which we're gonna figure this out, but it's JC 4 eyes, but it's really JC
Three
3
eyes,
eyes,
and then the word
and then images.com.
Okay. So it's JC 3 eyes.
3 eyes,
and then
images.com. And then if anyone's interested in any photography work, they can contact me through there.
Okay.
And yeah, man, like I said, that's where they can find me.
Yeah. And you have your work up there and
I have my work up there.
Cool,
Recent works that I've done in the past too. I've even caught some live events too, like that were for free. So yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me, man.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, there you go, guys. Another episode of the New Limits podcast. Thank you so much for listening, for watching on YouTube. Again, this podcast is on YouTube. It's on Spotify, streaming there. Please subscribe if you like it, and we'll see you guys on the next podcast.